we have a very important debate to settle now, Nemo.
What are we debating, good sir?
So what do you think?
No.
What?
We're not talking about this.
I know. Monster, Axial Altar, Tragodia, a small brook of Lazy, Haruka, Hoshiguma Altar, and now a collab character. Truly diabolical schedule, especially because of how strong Sakiko is, so you're probably gonna have to pull out the wallet for her. Luckily for you, there's still a way to save money with Loot Bar, the best platform to top up in gacha games. In there you can buy from special pull packs for Sakiko to the cosmetics sold for this collab, all for a discounted price and the option for you to self-top up, that way no one will get your account credentials. All that with a 24/7 customer service, full refund guarantee and a 4.9 score on Trustpilot with more than 38k reviews and tons of positive comments, so there's no need to worry about if you'll get your stuff or not. So if you want to guarantee your Sakiko and maybe even some cosmetics, you can use my link in either the description or pinned comment for a 6% discount. It can go as low as 23% cheaper than buying in-game when you add everything up. I'm very grateful to Loot Bar for sponsoring this video, so now let's get back to talking about how Sakiko changed everything. Power creeping one of the most popular op schedules always relied on, and just being one of the strongest guards in the game overall. Sakiko manages to do that while also being the gold standard for collab characters. To show why, let's analyze her kit and synergy with other ops, starting with S1. So why am I showing you a clip of her attacking nothing, you might ask? That's a great question, but I'll answer it later. Because I might have said she's one of the strongest guards in arknights, but contrary to her competition that usually just needs one button press to kill everything in range, Sakiko has probably the most intricate kit in her class, especially if you consider the order of Emujika ops. And the first and most complex mechanic in here is also the flashiest, which is the musical notes. Like I said, they are what you see the most when Sakiko is deployed, and everything in her kit revolves around them, because simply put, these are her attacks projectiles. So of course Hyperglyph made sure that they work in the most unintuitive and complicated way possible. And it all starts before Sakiko even fires them, specifically this portion of talent, one that makes her attack continuously. What that means is that she'll keep spamming attacks even when there aren't any enemies inside her range. That's the reason you'll always see constant stream of nodes in front of Sakiko, since like I said, these are her projectiles. And she doesn't do this just to look pretty with her mentally ill bandmates, though that is one of the side effects. But even inside Sakiko's kit, she benefits from this since all her skills are offensive recovery, so she's able to ignore the biggest downside of it by supplying her own SP even when there aren't any mobs to hit, while also keeping the benefits like operated and collectible synergies in IS. All this has been pretty simple so far, but it's now that we start getting more complex, because this is when I talk about the nodes 2 modes. Basically, whenever Sakiko generates a node, the game checks to see if there's an enemy inside her range. If the answer is no, then said node will start on free mode and just wander aimlessly until it leaves Sakiko's range for more than 1 second, at which point it'll just disappear. If there are enemies in her range though, then the node will start on lock mode, which is basically a pretty way of saying it'll lock onto the mob closest to reaching the blue box. If this was all, then it would already be more complicated than normal projectiles, but it goes even deeper when we talk about how they switch modes. Like I said, each node only starts on free or lock mode, but they can switch from one to another under certain conditions. What you see right now is a flowchart done by the same community that I translated into English so it's easier to explain. And yes, there are a lot of arrows and a lot of conditions just for a projectile. I told you this thing is complex. If you want, you can read through all this, but to give that TLDR, they also stay in free mode until they get close enough to a mob. When that happens, they'll switch to lock mode, mark that enemy as its target, and immediately go after them. For the opposite to happen, a node in lock mode needs to lose its target, so basically the mob it's locked down to needs to die before it reaches them. Then the node will go into free mode and have a cooldown before it can lock onto someone again. Like I said before, it's a pretty complex system for a projectile, but at least this is everything covered. For now anyways. Now we can finally get to S1. It's a very simple skill. All it does is just generate 8 nodes that alerts damage, with each one of them gradually dealing less damage. But what really differentiates it from the others is this last portion here. It lets S1 store 2 charges, but once the second one is stored, Sakiko will immediately fire the skill once, meaning that this is both an AFK and a normal skill. At the same time it auto-activates once it has 2 charges, it also leaves one there for you to manually manage it. This skill is gonna have have some very big problems for a lot of people. One of them is the very low damage output, since the hardest hitting note here will only do as much damage as a normal attack from Sakiko. And yes, she does spawn 8 of them per activation, but when each subsequent note deals less damage than the last, with the final one going as low as 5% of her attack, then the end result is just not that impressive. But honestly, the biggest problem with S1 is that her other skills are better, especially S2, since that skill directly competes with S1's AFK role and does its job more effectively. There are, however, a few reasons some of you might want to use S1, and all of them connect to my next topic, which is the other of Emotica ops. Now, this isn't the review of every one of them, because I don't want to sit here for an hour. So what you need to know is that every op in this collab has two things in common: mental stability and the fact they all support each other. Kinda. Each and every one of the Avemudica girls has some sort of buff inside their kits that benefits both themselves as well as the other members of the band. And Sakiko works very smoothly even without any of those buffs, so you don't need to worry about another Blaze Altar situation where part of a kit is locked behind pulling and raising another up. Rather, their synergy is more akin to the Abyssal Hunters, with buffs that stack together to form something that's bigger than the sum of its parts once they're all deployed. And one of Sakiko's roles in this comp comes from her talent one. This is the same one that lets her keep attacking without mobs in range, but this time I'm gonna talk about this portion of it. It makes so for every note that exists on field, all of Emotica ops will ignore 3% defense and 2% res up to 10 times. So all band members can ignore up to 30% defense and 20% res if 10 notes are on field. This talent is broken not just with the team synergy, but even if you just bring Sakiko on her own, that is very busted. Especially when you talk about her modulator. And this is an upside of using S1. Like I said, this skill generates 8 notes per activation. Not just that, but it also only costs 3 SP and it activates on its own. This isn't the best skill to maximize this talent, that title will go to S2, but you will have a good amount of notes on field consistently. So you can just leave it there for Sakiko to buff the other ops, since this skill is just so good for consistent note generation. And being so good at that is what makes this skill the best, finally, for our next topic: Fever. I'll go more in depth about this in the next section, since Fever ties to her second talent, but the TLDR is that it's a mechanic exclusive to Avemudica ops, and you can check on it once they're deployed by just looking at this musical note above their HP bar. This is actually a meter shared by all members of the band that makes so once you use a skill while it's full, all of them will also activate their skills at once and keep spamming them for 20 seconds. With the best part being that only the op used to trigger Fever will have their skills consumed, while everyone else will get to keep theirs full. It's a very broken mechanic, so it's balanced around how fast you can charge it. And just like the exclusive buffs every member gives each other, they also all charge the Fever meter in their own unique way. For Sakiko, that happens when she hits a mob with her notes, meaning that the more she hits enemies, the faster you get Fever, which is perfect for the best skill at consistently generating notes. In fact, that one makes a lot more sense when you look at it this way. This skill is the easiest to spam with its 3 SP cost coupled with the auto activation, deals the least amount of damage when compared to the others, which does make her kill enemies slower, but it also means that each kill will require more notes to hit them, so she does end up getting more Fever per enemy killed on S1. This skill was designed to charge Fever as efficiently as possible. If you just bring Sakiko on her own without the other band members, then even the extra generation can't really push it over S2. That skill is just on another level for comfort when Sakiko's alone. But if you want to bring her together with the others, then this is a very good option if you want to maximize Fever and spam their skills as much as possible, which is actually a very good strat if you want to go more AFK. And this AFK thing also connects with the last reason you might use S1, which is how we get to the clip at the start of this section. So why am I making her attack nothing? Well, that's because the star here isn't Sakiko, but rather Umiri. I said I wasn't going to explain the other ops kits, but this synergy in specific key is very strong, so it is worth talking about it. Umiri's talent gives her a 21% chance to slow mobs every time she hits them, and her skill 1 makes her attack 5 times once it's activated. So the idea is to use it to almost guarantee a slow on every mob in range. The problem is that, as you can see, it's an offensive recovery skill, and her attacks are pretty slow. So she suffers a lot of downtime, and the effect can feel a bit weak for the time it requires to charge. But as you can see on screen, that skill also activates when other of Emotica ops use their skills, which synergizes perfectly with Sakiko's S1. Since that skill will auto-activate every few seconds, it means Umiro will start spamming her S1 at the same rate as Sakiko, which turns her into a really good crowd control option that can even compete with Fastclaw inside of AFK setups. So you'll have Sakiko spamming notes to buff Umiri at the same time to help her supercharge Fever and spam her S1 for damage and crowd control. That's when S1 can compete with Fast too. It still doesn't always win, that's how oppressive impressive as 2 is, but it does get some cases for people who want to spare a squad slot. Overall, S1 is a niche skill. Yes, it charges fever faster, which can be used effectively if you're using the Avemujica ops, but a lot of people are just gonna bring Sakiko on her own. In which case, the extra fever is just not enough to compete with the other skills. And even if you do bring them, you might still prefer the other ones. S1 more offsets the tone for how Sakiko synergizes with the other ops. So if you know what you're doing, you might find some uses, but overall there's no harm in skipping it.
同じ作戦を描いていますわね。この黄昏の楽園に私は君臨し続ける。ほどの戦術、非常に素晴らしい作戦でしたわ。私は
I see.
Wait, what? Oh, she's... Okay, I see how it is.
And that's how we get to the Thorns Killer.
ドクター、人形はかりそめの命を宿す。
This is Sakiko's... I don't wanna call anything that involves this note simple, but yes, this is her simplest skill. All it does is give Sakiko 2 stances she can switch between that both offer different effects. So basically mountains has 2. The main stance Sakiko gets here is her piano mode. Yes, another proper noun for you to remember. Have fun. But this one is actually pretty simple as it mainly refers to the type of damage her notes will deal, which in piano mode is physical damage, and it also gives Sakiko a plus 110% attack buff. But by far the most important effect of piano mode is the third one, because it gives her notes piercing, meaning you don't need to care about how many mobs appear as most will get hit by Sakiko. It's this simple combo of effects that make S2 as strong as it is. She really didn't need another stance in this skill, but that's what they gave her anyway, which is how we get to organ mode. The default state of S2 is piano mode, which does physical damage, but when you switch to organ mode, all her notes will deal arts instead. This is the most basic way to differentiate them, but there are 2 extra effects here that push them further apart. The first you probably noticed when I used on the last clip, which is an obscene attack speed buff that more than doubles Sakiko note generation speed. But you're not gonna see them speeding through the field because this mode also reduces their travel speed, meaning that Sakiko backloaded ton of damage for it to then reach its target. It's especially good when mobs have too much defense for piano mode, and they made it very easy to switch between the 2 since this skill only costs 5 SP, so you can easily use each mode to complement each other. Piano is the overall best for wave clearing and organ if higher defense mobs with lower res appear. But this is not the only thing this mode's good for, which is how you get her talent too. And this is where we talk about Fever. Like I said before, that's the red note above the collab ops HP that grants them infinite skills for 20 seconds. How it works is that the note is a shared bar that can store 450 Fever, and I say shared because once one ops consumes it, it'll be used by everyone and go back to 0 right after, so you do need to know when to use that skill burst. Luckily, like I said on this one section, they can also all charge Fever, but since each member has a different way of doing it, some will charge it better than others. As you should know by now, Sakiko does it by hitting enemies. Every time a note lands on one, she gains 3 Fever, so if you want her to charge faster, it's better to use skills that generate more notes over time, like S1 or the organ mode of S2. That's one of the other uses you have for it. And sometimes it's legit the correct play to sacrifice the skill's damage so you can turbocharge Fever. Because if the end result is that you can kill all mobs anyway, then it's better that you have more Fever by the end of it than to have her kill the same amount of mobs but with a lot less of it charged. Things get a lot more interesting when you consider the other ops though. Because for as generic as Sakiko's way of charging Fever is, she isn't the best at doing it. That title actually goes to Mutsumi, which might be surprising when you see she does it by taking damage or elemental injury. But when you see that her talent converts damage taken into necrosis and that her S2 makes her take damage every time she hits enemies on top of turning her attacks into triple hits, then it's really easy to see why she's so good at being a battery. All you need to do is use her skill, and as long as she keeps attacking, you'll have more than half of the Fever bar charged by the end of it. And if you have mobs to attack her and then all she leaves, you might even see it fully charged with just one deploy. And I say one deploy because another feature of Fever I still didn't mention is that the bar's progress is saved even if you have no ops. So you can legit undeploy Mutsumi after the job is done, have no other Avemujica op on field, and when you deploy one of them, all the Fever she charged will be there. But it's not just as a battery that you can use the other collab ops, which brings us to the next synergy.
はい、失礼します。
If you actually bother to read talents you want to put it on screen, then you also notice this part in it. It makes so you can combine the emoji cop's range with Sakiko's and lets you create a true abomination in terms of range extension that covers almost the entire field. All you need is to have at least one tile where their original range intersect, and the game will fuse both together, treating everything as Sakiko's range. That way she can benefit from parts of her kit that are related to it, like her notes for instance, since as you can see they disappear after leaving her range for more than 1 second. So stacking more of emoji cops is a way to make them last longer on field and reach further away enemies. Sakiko even gives an attack speed buff for ops inside her range. If you want to use this extension, then the opposite, the biggest ranges are the ones to pick, which in this case would be weak and Dumiri since the archetypes have big ranges naturally. You really don't need to use this since Sakiko is already strong on her own, but it definitely improves her performance a lot to bring the other girls. They really wanted to reward fans of the IP for using them together, which then takes us to the weaknesses of S2. And there aren't too many to be honest. The first is what you see on screen, which is high defense and res enemies, and I really don't know what to say here. Yes, you don't use Sakiko's S2 to kill Patriot, the same way you wouldn't use Executor's S1 or Thorn's S3 or the majority of lane hold and AFK skills. They just aren't built to kill static bosses, so just try to avoid them when using it. Another issue is RNG, and this is something you might have noticed by now. See how every time Sakiko creates a note they seem to never go through the same route as the others. The reason for that is that the way the game chooses where they go is semi-random, and just like a lot of Sakiko's other mechanics, this one is pretty complex. The TLDR is that once a note is created, the game will pick a random angle between 40 degrees of where she's facing and send the note in that direction. If you have a mob inside her range, then this is a non-issue since lock will simply make the note go towards them. The problem here is when they are outside of Sakiko's range, since the notes can just go on opposite directions if they want to. And on S2 that's even more noticeable because of the piercing. Because of the way piercing works on S2, it makes the note go in a random fixed direction after hitting a mob, so they can just decide to go where there isn't anyone to hit if they want to, which brings even more variance of result to this skill. Really, if you want to mitigate this issue, the solution is her talent too, since with a bigger range she can consistently lock on the same mobs. But usually this isn't that big of an issue if you're just bringing a normal squad. It'll just be more noticeable if you try to limit push with her, so it shouldn't affect most players that much. Overall, S2 is a really good skill. It's extremely cheap and comfortable to use, lets you switch between arts and physical damage, and if you bring the other collab up, she becomes a monster with all the buffs. So this is definitely a skill you should invest in if you get her.
Oh,
You ready, Demo?
I'm ready. Let's go. Wait, why are you deploying all of them?
It's gonna be very cool, Dumbo.
What are you doing? Oh, that was. Oh, that was fast. What happens in phase? Oh wait, what? Hey, wait, what? Okay.
Finally, then we have S3.
ドクター、人形はかりそめの命を宿す。心地より草の本。荒れ地は送電となる。
This is Sakiko's big damage skill and her strongest one overall. But do you want to know the best part? No fucking new terminology. So I don't need to use half the seconds time putting exclamation marks on top of notes or showing you flowcharts with blurred Sakiko's feet on the background to explain something new. We're so back. Instead, S3 feels more like if you fused S1 and S2 in their fever modes. If you remember, Sakiko starts spamming S1 once it enters fever, and since you can't spam S2 since that will just keep switching stances, what happens when it enters fever is that it will spawn 2 notes per attack of whatever stance you're on once you activate it. And once you use S3, Sakiko starts spamming notes almost like S1, but instead of normal ones, these are organ and piano mode notes. The same ones you needed to switch stanzas to get access to on S2. Here Sakiko shoot 2 of each per attack, like an upgraded version of Fever mode in S2, since now you don't need to pick which one of them you want, and with a much higher attack multiplier. So you get the benefits of dealing both types of damage, but without the drawback of only being able to use one at a time. As a drawback, this skill does have to deal with an actual SP cost though, instead of being basically passive like the other two. That's the baseline we're working with here. And as you can quite literally see right now, S3 does hit really hard. Yes, a lot of that is because of the mixed damage, since part of her notes will ignore the Steam Knight's 2.8k defense, but there is another reason she can go for this giant stat stick, which is her talent one. That one that lets her ignore up to 30% defense and 20% res if you have 10 notes on field. And the reason I'm bringing it up again is because of her module, since as you can see it increases how much each note gives as ignore and raises the cap of how many you can stack. So at level 3 this module lets the Avemuji Ops ignore up to 60% defense and 30% res if you manage to get 12 notes on field. I don't think I need to explain how broken this is, but just in case you don't get it, you can see the comparison on screen. The difference it makes is absurd for mobs with very high res and defense, which makes this module a priority to build if you want to use Sakiko. It's easily one of the best modules in Arknights in terms of improvement, as it lets Sakiko just melt through most enemy stats. All this and we still didn't even talk about the most broken thing about S3, which is how it interacts with Fever. If you read the skill, you'll see that it makes all of Avemuji Ops immortal while on Fever mode. And maybe you think that's what I'm referring to. I mean, it is pretty strong, I'm not gonna deny that. But you know what's better? Duplicate skills.
ドクター今助けるね覚悟を考えなければ ドクター月はあなたをどこまでも追い詰める
What you just saw was Sakiko using 3 S3s in a row, back to back to back. This is what Fever was building up to. I couldn't really show how truly broken this thing is up until now, since her other skills don't care about SP and are mostly AFK. But since S3 breaks both of those patterns, it's very evident how abusable this mechanic is on such a strong skill. And it's honestly not hard at all to set this thing up, all you're doing is using the mechanic as intended. It goes back to how I said it works. If you remember, I said it consumes the skill of the op used to trigger, and some of you might have assumed the skill just vanishes after it. But how it works is that the op you use to trigger will just immediately activate their skill after Fever is done. So in practice what happens is that instead of just using it once, the op used to trigger Fever gets to activate their skill twice in a row. And this is where you can abuse it for Sakiko's S3. Since the skill lasts for 25 seconds, all you need to do is charge the Fever meter back up during that time. Which is not hard at all, given how S3 by itself will charge most of the meter by the time it's over. So you really just need someone else to give it a little push. And that can even be Sakiko herself if you want to wait for her S3 to recharge. But obviously if you do that you won't be able to stack skills in a row. So the best choice are the other Avemuji Ops, since they themselves can activate Fever while Sakiko is on downtime. And the best ones for that are Mutsumi and Duika, since the way one of them charges it complements the other. Outside of that you can also use other ops like Monster to give her attack speed, which does help her charge Fever by generating more nodes on top of also significantly buffing her damage output, since all her buffs synergize really well with Sakiko. And if you're inside IS, then of course you have Arquero to turbocharge S3, since she's able to completely refill the skill in just a few seconds, so you do have a lot of options even without the other collab ops. Really, this skill is just absurd, especially if you know how to abuse the Fever mechanic, but there are a few issues you might face when using it, and they mostly all relate to the nodes. The first one has to do with how slow they move. If Sakiko is attacking a stationary enemy or a mob going towards her, then there's zero issues with this. But if that's not the case, then it's totally possible for mobs to avoid her attacks by simply moving around. This is actually a problem on her other skills too, but it does impact S3 a lot more since this isn't an AFK skill like those, so it's best to avoid places with too many fast moving mobs. The second node related issue has to do with talent one. Like I said, she can ignore all that defense in the rest of 12 nodes on field, but remember that the nodes vanish once they hit a target, so the closer Sakiko reaches the mob she's hitting, the lower her damage compared to if she's attacking from further away. Of course, this isn't a 1-to-1 ratio, so her damage won't get gradually lower for every pixel they get closer. But if you're against a very tanky mob, then you really don't want Sakiko to be right on their face. Instead, the sweet spot's right where her extended range ends. That's where she's able to keep a good balance of nodes. And of course you can also use attack speed buffers to increase generation speed. That's honestly the best solution for flexibility. Overall, Sakiko is a very broken character. I did say at the start she's one of the strongest guards, but honestly I do think she's the strongest. Her kit is filled with ways to exploit the game if you want to, and it literally feels like you're cheating when you do make use of them. And instead of just being a one-button pony, everything about her kit is very complex. The same goes for her synergies with the other of Emojica ops. Hypergriff really cooked hard with this collab and gave us one of the most fun and busted playstyles in the game. If you care at all about IS, then she already is a must pull. Sakiko is easily the strongest guard in IS 6, but even for normal gameplay, her performance is just outstanding, especially if you stop having bad taste and actually raise a few of her friends. Then you can really go to town with basically any normal content in this game. So I don't think you're surprised to hear I think she's a must pull for meta. Sakiko is just on another level in terms of performance, kit design and good shoes, so you really can't go wrong pulling her. That's just my opinion though, so comment what you think of Sakiko, leave a like and subscribe too while you're at it. And if you want to support me, get a channel badge, use emotes on my comments, early access to videos, or even appear on a Blender special place, you can also consider becoming a member. I'll also think you're really cool if you do that. That's it then. Bye.
先ほどの戦術非常にお見事でした。あ、この勝利もあなたが用意したサプライズでして？